A very good day to all of you. Let's begin with Robert Browning's poem, My Last Duchess. The lifespan of Robert Browning is from 1812 to 1889. Robert Browning, a major Victorian poet and a contemporary of Tennyson, is known for his intellectual vigor and his psychological studies of human nature. Educated mostly at home, he was well versed in arts and their appreciation, and had every opportunity to travel. After his marriage, the Brownings lived mostly in Italy. Living away from England, his poetry reflects the dramatic world of the late Renaissance in Italy and imagination possessed by intense emotions and overriding passions. He also moved away from the subjective expression of romantic poetry, acquiring in the process a multiplicity of objective voices and creating interesting and fascinating characters. His achievement lies in the handling of form, especially the dramatic monologue, and his grasp of the psychological aspects of human nature. My Last Duchess was first published in 1842 in Bells and Pomegranates under the volume Dramatic Lyrics. As the title suggests, in these poems Browning experiments with form, combining some aspects of stage plays and some aspects of romantic verse to create a new type of poem. Robert Browning's My Last Duchess comes in the category of the type of verse known as dramatic monologue. Now, what is a dramatic monologue? Broadly speaking, poetry may be divided into two categories: personal or subjective poetry, and impersonal or objective poetry. In personal or subjective poetry, whether it may be a lyric, an ode, or a sonnet, the poet expresses his own thoughts, feelings, or experiences that he gets from the outer world or his own inner world. In it, he is rather introspective and writes what he feels or experiences. In impersonal or objective type of poetry, the poet leaves his individuality and participates in the activities and experiences of the world. He goes out of himself, mingles and deals with the actions and passions of the world with little reference to his own person. He does not speak about himself. Impersonal poetry can either be narrative or dramatic. In narrative verse, emphasis is laid on the description. The subject matter can be nature, human beings, war, stories, incidents, etc. Whereas dramatic poetry is a sort of verse that is to be read like a drama. A proper drama needs a stage, curtains, light arrangement, characters, and many other things. But in a dramatic poetry, these things are not required. The dramatic monologue is one of the most important type of dramatic poetry. Mono means single and log means conversation or speech. In it, from the very beginning to the end, a particular man or woman is installed as a single speaker. The poet selects a character and makes him speak in a dramatic fashion to a silent listener, whose presence is felt throughout the poetry. It is a form of speech addressed to a silent listener. As a matter of fact, dramatic monologue is a queer combination of drama and monologue. The dramatic monologue is a significant poetic form used extensively by Victorian poets. Since this age was characterized by experimentation, the dramatic monologue was a major form which was a product of this experiment. The first instance of dramatic monologue dates back to 1833 when Tennyson wrote Simeon Stylites. Among the notable poets who used this form, Robert Browning was the finest. A poem which is designated as dramatic monologue consists of the speech of a single character. The speaker reveals his or her thoughts, situation, and character during the course of the poem. The speaker is usually a single fictional or historical character. Exploration of character is the major concern of the dramatic monologue. The characters are highly individual and often suffer from alienation, which encompasses strange characters such as criminals, misfits, iconoclasts, rebels, and others. Most of the characters are an aberration to the norms of social conduct. But all the characters invariably adhere to some pattern of conformity as may be seen in their allegiance to the negative. This poetic form also has an implied listener to whom the speaker speaks. The presence of the listener gives the dramatic quality to the poem. The context, the scene, and the setting are usually depicted clearly so as to heighten the dramatic effect. The action of the poem is dependent on the words of the speaker and the implied response of the listener, which is also described by the speaker himself. The speaker reveals much about the inner working of his mind. That is why the psychological dimensions of a dramatic monologue is significant in all critical studies. Social status and hierarchy is also clearly indicated as it is evident in Robert Browning's poem My Last Duchess. Now, in the light of this knowledge, let's begin with the poem My Last Duchess. The poem tells the story of possessiveness and the consequent murder written in the form of dramatic monologue. The speaker is a 16th century Italian duke of the Renaissance period. The listener is a messenger who has come with a marriage proposal. The reader is exposed to a multifaceted examination of the act of murder. The duke's possessive passion for collecting objects of beauty, his sense of refinement, and aristocratic pride do not only contrast with his cruelty and material greed, but also provide in an uncanny way the explanation for it. In a brief span of 56 lines, the characters of the Duke, his dead wife, and the period are delineated very skillfully, at times with the help of parentheses, colloquial diction, and broken syntax. Here we can see that the title of the poem comprises of 3 words. The very first word, my, shows the possessiveness. The second word, last, depicts the non-existence of the Duchess. That's my last Duchess painted on the wall. You can see that the poem abruptly begins on a colloquial note. The speaker, a 16th century nobleman of Italy, is found addressing an envoy who is a messenger. A character who is a representative of an unidentified count whose daughter the Duke proposes to marry. It seems that there is some kind of negotiation between the two about the prospective marriage. Historically, this poem refers to the Duke Alfonso II of Ferrara and his dead wife. The last Duchess mentioned in the title refers to Lucrezia de Medici. The widowed Duke shows the picture gallery to the Count's envoy and speaks about his last Duchess, whose lifelike portrait he points out to the envoy. The painting reflects a realistic vitality. The Duke proudly tells that Fra Pandolf's artistic hands worked for a complete day to produce the marvelous art. The Duke names the painter intentionally and deliberately to indicate the perfection of the work of the great artist who could capture the intensity of expression. He says that strangers like the envoy have been surprised to notice the deep and passionate look in the earnest eyes of the Duchess. It could also imply that the Duke was careful to engage a priest to avoid any possibility of an affair between the two. He also inadvertently projects his possessive nature by saying that no strangers are allowed to see the portrait even though the Duchess is no longer alive. The messenger has been fortunate that the Duke drew the curtain aside to allow him to catch a glimpse of the beautiful Duchess. It is clear that this act of the Duke is fraught with deep significance as it is revealed in the later part of the poem. The coming lines explain the reason of the blush of joy on the cheeks of the Duchess. The Duke explains that it could have been the painter's remark that a cloak was covering the part of her wrist, suggesting thereby that her beauty was hidden, might have caused the blush, which was unacceptable to the possessive husband. It was a husband's conjecture, or the painter might have said that he could never hope to portray that soft, rosy tinge suffusing the throat of the Duchess, fading away along the neck. Even such trivial compliments had a great effect on the Duchess, who appreciated little acts of courtesy. The Duke reminisces that his dead wife had no sense of discrimination. It becomes quite evident from the speech that the Duke suspects her of infidelity. He was offended by her behavior as she did not give enough importance to him or his social rank and treated him just like any other ordinary person, smiling and blushing without differentiating between them. The Duke continues telling us that all the simple pleasures enthralled her equally. He wanted her to be beholden to him for making her his wife, which was a great position, but she seemed to be unaware of this. These lines explain that the Duke resented her way of thanking everyone. The Duchess's frank and easy disposition displeased the Duke, as he considered that it was not appropriate for a person occupying high rank and status of being his wife, seeing the sunset, branch of cherry presented, or a ride on the mule around her terrace all made her equally happy. He considered to be beneath his dignity to criticize his wife and correct her foolish behavior of showing such fervor and gratitude to others. The tone of this line explained the Duke's supreme egotism, snobbery, and unfalling sense of dignity. The Duke continues speaking about the faults in the Duchess. She did smile when he passed by her, but who passed without getting that smile? Habit of appreciation and showing courtesy to all and sundry for the most trivial things increased so much that the Duke could not tolerate it anymore. By his commands, all smiles stopped altogether. There is a sinister hint that the Duchess did not die a natural death. The Duke now moves to more material concerns. He says that he considers the Count's known generosity as a sufficient guarantee for getting a large dowry to satisfy his legitimate expectations. His cunning diplomacy is revealed in the flattery of the Count and his fair daughter. The Duke is inhumanly proud and dignified. He is also greedy and typifies the materialism of Renaissance. After the subtle warning of the fate the disobedient wife meets and the hint about the expected dowry, the Duke leads the envoy down the stairs to join the party. The Duke then draws the attention of the envoy to a statue of Neptune taming a seahorse, proudly remarking that it was made by Claus of Innsbruck. The statue symbolizes the Duke's autocratic and dominating nature. He tames people instead of seahorses. Again, it is a warning for the kind of marriage which the Count's daughter can expect with the Duke exercising all power over her. The poem comes to an end as abruptly as it begins, but the mastery of Browning is evident in that it tells a complete story with the most powerful dramatic effect. My Last Duchess has all the typical features of dramatic monologue. Number 1, the speaker is obviously different from the poet. Number 2, the silent listener is implied. Number 3, the narrator's character is brought to light. Number 4, the whole poem is composed in the rhyming pentameter lines. Number 5, in some places, Browning uses an AABB rhyme scheme commonly found in ballad and songs. Number 6, as the sentence and other grammatical units do not conclude at the end of the lines. The rhymes do not give a sense of closure when they occur, but rather remain a subtle driving force behind the Duke's compelling revelation. About the style of the poem. Number 1. Brevity of the poem. In just 56 lines, Browning gives a concentrated picture of a whole lifetime in the poem. Number 2. This intense poem is seen in condensed and epigrammatic style. Next, the Victorian quality of Browning's art gets highlighted in this poem. The reader can easily visualize the scene which is being described and vividly participate in the dramatic events in the poem. The character study is complex and yet interesting. They still have special appeal for the readers of modern times. The method is unique. He does not write a full-fledged drama, but makes shorter character studies. The primary concern of Browning is the soul or psychological study of the human mind. The poem is a unique example of experimental study of the character. It is through the soul dissection that various things are explored. Human soul has various layers, and Browning plunges in medias res and dwells deep into the soul of the speaker and lets the reader to be a part of this character exploration. Browning takes his subject as some striking individual at a critical juncture and then penetrates to the depth of his nature. The kind of justification offered by Duke's sinister action is what a wrongdoer always do. The poem splits open the past instances and juxtaposes them with the present happenings. The Duke, overtly talking about the ways of the Duchess, tries to justify her untimely end, showing himself in the negative light. For him, it is demeaning to correct her. She should instinctively know what pleases him and what does not, and act accordingly. Marriage for him is a power game, with him having all the control. And when the Duchess do not follow the rules of his game, she is no longer worthy of being alive. So the whole narration and visual display of the aliveness of the Duchess hanging on the wall is to ensure that the next wife will not violate any of the unwritten rules of the marriage which he would lay down for her. So here we end the most powerful psychological study in Robert Browning's poem, My Last Duchess.